Rahul back, Moisar. Rahul back. All right. We are back. We are back. Another beautiful week. We are back with Wu-Sabat, and we're gonna get started. So I hope you guys are ready. All right, now for those who do not know me, my name is Peti Sina Tebtu Re'e, and I've been over a 30-year student teacher of the profound doctrine of the master teacher, known to us as Padabab Yananan, also known as Dr. Malachi Z.K. York, who has been teaching us our ancient culture. We identify as Wu-Sabat, also known as Wu-Nawab, which stands for those who make decisions based on sound right reasonability, based on the principles of Ma'at, based on the wisdom of the Hutui. In essence, our culture was about being in harmony with natural nature. Today they call it animism, understanding that existence is animated, it's full of life energies, and we were in harmony and in tune with these life-giving energies of existence. And we argue that the suffering that we've been dealing with for the last 6,000 years and the ultimate suffering we've been dealing with for the last 500 years under racism, white supremacy, is due to the fact that we gotten away from our original culture, our original way of doing things, our culture that allowed us to maintain harmony, to maintain justice. We're living foreign cultures, and what we've been trying to teach is that the suffering that we're dealing with, the chaos that we're dealing with as a people all over the globe, is due to living these foreign cultures. And so the master teacher has came in this day and time, who has been trying his best to re-educate our people about our original way of life, our original way of our original cultures, and how we was able to rule as a great people. We've forgotten that, and he's dedicated all his time and energy to trying his best to re-educate. And I'm just one of many student teachers around the globe who has also dedicated themselves to trying our best to re-educate our people about this ancient culture. And so we've set up question and answer classes and lectures like what I'm doing, trying our best to inform our people about this ancient culture. Okay. And I always like to make a disclaimer. I'm not above making mistakes. I know I make mistakes. And so I have no problem making those corrections as needed. So I definitely like to put that out there. Now, before we get started, we always like to start with our opening namaz called prayer, right? Our culture is about spiritual development as African people. We've always been a highly spiritual people. And this is what connected us with our ancestors. This is what our prayers were about, making contact with our ancestors who exist on higher dimensions and always communicating with them because they're our family. And our prayer systems are designed just for that. Okay. And so for those who've been watching me, they're very familiar. And if you haven't watched me and you're watching for the first time, as you watch any of our lectures, this is what we do. And we've had a discussion and explaining the science behind prayers and chanting, the rituals that we do. So definitely take the time out to watch that if you have not. So with all that being said, let's get started. Bade Kalal Namasat Wufako Amer Kasemun Shalal Paut. Pa Sawat Wu Pa Tara. Panen Safa Kawun. Pa Sawat Wu Pa Tara. Z Kawuna Nazula Lehe Enkum. Maneh Sabat Wu-Sabat. Amer Hadayan Un. Shefe Un. Maneh Salafu Wunataru. Ajula Ye Nafasu Kum. Afuk Shane Kawun Kuma. Pa Sawat Wu Pa Tara. This book is the truth and the way. It was sent down for you all from Sabat Wu-Sabat, star constellation, as a guidance and a healing. From your ancestors and overseers, return to your own. Accept what is yours, the truth and the way. Anun tawa ankum lehe penan shafe unwu alaj. Anun tawa ankum lehe nasuinun. Anun tawa ankum lehe ashuk. Ankum ata salafunun. Anun ata khadat ukum. Anun talub nasar kuma. Anun talub nasar kuma. And so nun sayim natharu. And so nun salafu nun. Anun ata munwapu. We thank you all for this healing and cure. We thank you all for not forgetting us. We thank you for Ashuk. You are our ancestors, and we are your children. We seek your help. We seek your help. Help us, divine overseers. Help us, our ancestors. We are Musba'u. Anun. Atun. Atun. A.M.O.M. Jannah 4. Alrighty then. All right. Okay. So, in the beginning of every class that we do, we go over our core principles of Wu-Sabat / Wu-Nawab. It is imperative that everyone understand the core principles. The core principles is how we live. This is what we live by as far as our culture of Wu-Sabat. And anyone who's studying Wu-Sabat, one, they should know the core principles inside and out. Because we're supposed to be implementing these things into our day-to-day actions and deeds. And for those who are new, who are not familiar with it, this gives you an idea what our whole culture is about, right? The basic principles. And so we go over this every week as a reminder. All of our lectures and discussions are based around the core principles. Okay, so this is imperative that we understand these things. Now, principle number 1 is Ashak. Ashak stands for divine love. Existence is based on Ashak. Right? And we did a discussion on that, so definitely check that out. Principle number 2 is resurrection. As African people, our goal is to become like our ancestors who were goddesses and gods by learning to reopen our third eye as we once did once before. Okay, and we did quite a bit of discussions on that, so definitely check that out. Principle number 3 is the wisdom of Dahutri and Ma'at. Dahutri stands for our divine mind, and Ma'at stands for order. And we did discussions on that, so definitely check that out. Principle number 4 is relationships. As an African people, we always live of, for, and by each other, right? Our culture was not based on capitalism, communism, or socialism, or any of the isms. Our culture was based on Wu-Sabat, living in harmony and at peace with one another. We did a lecture on that, so definitely check that out. And one of our African terms of our culture was Ubuntu. Definitely look that up, guys. Principle number 5 is morphic resonance slash matrix. Morphic resonance stands for sound, color, tones, frequencies, vibrations, and matrices are the manifestations of those morphic resonant frequencies. Principle number 6 is Leviathan. Leviathan stands for moon culture, aka religion, aka Western culture. This is what we've been at war with for the last 6,000 years, or the spirit forces of Leviathan. We did discussions on that, so definitely check that out. Not to mention the master teacher wrote like 6-7 books on the subject. Okay, principle number 7 is soul and spirit. Your soul is your emotional force. Your spirit is your life force. We did discussions on that, so definitely check that out. Principle number 8 is health. The first key to health is a positive mind, right? Sunlight, as melanated children, we need a lot of sunlight. Water, the body is 70% water. Fasting, we recommend at least once or twice a week. Herbal diet, as Dr. Sabi has taught us. Exercising, rhythmic breathing, meditation, concentration, prayer, and chanting. Health, as we always say, is not just physical, but it's also spiritual. We argue our people are suffering health-wise because they don't know this. They forgot that science, that you can't do one without the other because it creates imbalancement. And it is the cause of all the health problems we're dealing with. We lost our spiritual knowledge on health. Principle number 9 is Pa'ut. The creative force itself is Pa'ut. We call it Pa'ut. That's the name of existence. We just say Pa'ut. It just means all. You can't add to the all because where would you get it from? You can't take from the all because where would you put it? Right? And existence is based on cycles. We call it the SMAT circle. It's ever-changing cycles. And existence, is, the creation energy of existence is called Akach. Okay? Akach. And we did discussions on that, so definitely check that out. All right. Now, as a student of Wu-Sabat, we have 3 primary goals. Goal number 1 is to raise the self. Goal number 2 is to fight Leviathan. And goal number 3 is to work to build Sabbatia. Okay. Now, goal number 1 in raising the self, you must become born again, as the Christians teach, which is giving up the old culture, Western culture, for your new culture, Wu-Sabat, and live it, right? Make it known. And doing that, one of the first objective is to correct your name, right? By choosing a Sabaean name, like your ancestors. Okay, so that's imperative. Correcting how you dress. Also, correcting how you dress. That's important. Learn to speak the language. Sabaic language is key. That's why we talk about morphic resonance so much. Language is key. You must study our doctrine each and every day, which builds your sound right reasoning skills. This is what's going to help you in your decision-making skills by constantly studying the doctrine. The key is making better decisions, guys. And it's the doctrine that we put out. The master's written hundreds and hundreds of books on the things we should be doing, all of us. And we must practice and master our daily rituals to turn yourself inside out. This is how you're going to open your third eye. If you don't do the rituals every day, there's no way you're going to achieve that goal, right? And you must always be positive. In order to get anything worthwhile done, the positive mind is key. Now, second goal in Wu-Sabat is to fight Leviathan. We're at war with Leviathan. This is what we've been struggling with for the last 6,000 years. This includes working to free Panda Babyanana, promoting Wu-Sabat, and become a student teacher, and fight the 6 strongest weapons of Leviathan, which are our ignorance, our fears, our ego, anger, our lust/desires, and our lies/deceptions. This is what Leviathan feeds off, these weaker energies of us. Okay? And goal number 3 is to work to build Sabbatia. We had our own land, they took it, and we have to get our own land so we can create our own communities again. We work to support each other in business. We help each other reach positive goals. We help to build our culture. We must set up a landing zone for Panatharu in Africa, which means we need land in Africa that would be supported by an African government. And Ashuk is the key to accomplish all our goals. Now, what does it mean to be a Sabaean? A Sabaean is someone who's thoughtful and cares, someone who's helpful and honest, someone who's responsible and hardworking, someone who demands justice and honorable, someone who's righteous and humble, someone who's positive and cheerful, someone who is loving and peaceful, someone who's kind and considerate, and someone who's neat, clean, and orderly. Our purpose. Our purpose is liberation from adverse forces, right? This is what we're all struggling towards each and every day. In doing that, number one, you must take action each and every day to free yourself of six ether spirits inside and out, which includes black people who are possessed by these spirit forces. Number two, acknowledge and fight six ether from promoting capitalism, the gay agenda, miscegenation, the so-called equality of the races, and racism, white supremacy. And number three, learn, live by, and promote the laws/rules of natural nature. And each one teach one, guys. Each one teach one. Do not forget that. Each one teach one. Word of advice: do not judge this doctrine by watching the behavior of Panabat Yanani nor his students. Judge this doctrine by the effectiveness of the information, aka affirmation, that you personally put to practical use. This doctrine is based on self-authentication, guys. We've said this many, many times. Now, know that we're not preachers, but teachers who are dedicated to answering questions until there's a meeting of the minds between teacher and student, who then can work in unity, which is the only solution to our problems. Quote, what you do for yourself in kind depends on what you think of yourself in kind. What you think of yourself in kind depends on what you know of yourself in kind. And what you know of yourself in kind depends on what you was taught and by whom of yourself in kind. Another quote, until the lion have their historians, the hunter will always be the hero. Next, the negative mind talks of what it can't and will not do for self and kind, always complaining about who they don't like or trust, whereas the positive mind always maintains the peace by not complaining about that in which they do not like, but focus on finding solutions to their problems, never allowing obstacles to get in the way of growth. Okay, so that is our core principles. Let's see. All right, we have a question on learning how to do the rhythmic breathing techniques. Actually, we probably can get into that today. Okay, so today's discussion, in essence, what we're going to do is we're going to go over the class that the master teacher did. It was called the A.M.O.M class, and we're going to listen to the whole class. And what I was going to do is break into different portions of the class and talk about certain sections and concepts that the master teacher was talking about to bring more clarity to the subject matter of spiritual development, right? Because our whole goal in doctrine is based on spiritual development. There is no success and liberation without our people developing themselves spiritually, and this is the one key that so many of our people miss, and this is why we're still struggling. Until we master our spiritual development, there is no solution, as the master teacher has started out in the very beginning. The problem that black people are dealing with is racial blindness, right? Our division that we've been fighting each other for the last 6,000 years. That goes back to ancient Nubia and in Egypt fighting each other all the way till today, the Crips and the Bloods, right? And so that's our racial blindness. We forgot that we all come from the same genetic origins, and we're supposed to represent one mind, many bodies. And we forgot that science. And the reason why we forgot that science is because we lost our spiritual knowledge. When you lose your spiritual knowledge, you forget your origins or why you even exist. And this is the question that humans are running around trying to figure out their origins and where they come from. And do we come from Lucy and those bones that they be finding? And they're trying to figure out the origin of consciousness. And what is consciousness? Is it the brain, a product of the brain, or is the brain a product of the mind? So there's so many questions that the world has been asking, and so-called scientific minds of today are trying to figure out. And these are things that we always knew. These are things we taught. but yet we forgot. And we can't begin to solve our problems and restore ourselves in greatness until we restore our spiritual knowledge. And so this class that the master teacher had was on that information, on spiritual development. And so it was a part of the A.M.O.M class. It was an A.M.O.M class, and the master teacher was introducing us to A.M.O.M. If I could bring it up here. Let's see if I can find it. Let's see right here. This was one of the A.M.O.M lessons, okay? And the ancient, it stands for the Ancient Mystic Order of Melchizedek, and the abbreviation is A.M.O.M, or we've said A.M.O.M also. And so this was what this discussion is all about. The master teacher did a lecture on this particular subject matter. And so this discussion that we're going to play took place in 1998. It took place in 1998. I was in the class. I was in that class in 1998. And I've talked about this before, right? I discussed this before. And I was able to ask 2 questions in that particular class. It was late at night because with the A.M.O.M classes, we had this. This was in we was in Eatonton, Georgia. Eatonton, Georgia. For those who do not know, this is when we had our land. We had just under 500 acres of land, and we was building our community there. We built pyramids. It was a beautiful place, and they took it from us, unfortunately, and we have to rebuild it, obviously. But the class took place on the land in 1998. It was at night. And it, it probably was no more than 20, 30 people, if that, no more than that. Because usually when a master teacher does a class, you got hundreds of people that be there. But when it comes to the spiritual classes, this is the issue. And this is something the master teacher is going to talk about in that particular lesson. This is something we talk about that, unfortunately, the master always said he had 2 types of students. I always bring this up, right? Those who are celestial in nature, celestial beings, versus those who are terrestrial in nature. Meaning those students who are focused on developing themselves spiritually, which is why they became students of the master teacher. And those students who really didn't focus on that, they were more terrestrial or materialistic in nature. I think a lot of the students that came into our organization came in from a nationalistic point of view to build our own nation, which is mainly the main focus of most Black people around the globe, is to build up a Black nation again. That's why the Nation of Islam calls themselves the Nation of Islam, or the Nation of Gods and Earths. Everybody's talking about nation building. That's what the whole Marcus Garvey movement was about. Pan-Africanism was Black people building their own nation. And as Sabians, as Nawapians, this is our whole theme, is to build our Black nation. We just teach that in order for us to build a successful Black nation, you have to have a spiritual doctrine. And in order to have a spiritual doctrine, you have to know it, you have to live it. So you can't do one without the other. It's just that some people, they think, well, majority of people think you can do one without the other. But all you got to do is look at all the Black nations on the planet and see the corruption, see the chaos. There's no justice there. Whether you go from Haiti to Jamaica or all throughout Africa, North Africa, South Africa, East Africa, West Africa, you see corruption. You see, in fact, all you see is copies of the European systems that are not designed to work. This is why Black nations are suffering all over the globe. Those cultural systems do not work for us. It may work for Caucasians, but it surely does not work for us. And our people forgot their original cultures, how we actually ruled ourselves, all of our principles. We've lost those things. And so you have to develop your culture, and you can't develop your culture without a spiritual doctrine. This is why the Caucasian has a spiritual doctrine, which is Christianity. The Asiatics have a spiritual doctrine. The Chinese have Taoism and Taoism, and the Indians have Hinduism. The Arabs have Islam. You have to have a spiritual doctrine. Black people, we are copying the spiritual doctrines of other races of people. You cannot You cannot borrow a spiritual doctrine of another race. It's not possible. You can't do that and think that is going to work for you. It doesn't work that way. Okay. And so it is imperative that we understand that. So with all that being said, like I said, we're going to play the class. We're going to play the class, and then we're going to, cut into the class and do breakdowns on concepts. And I hope you guys, because the tape is not that good, so that I'll try to, explain some of the questions. If you guys are having a hard time hearing the questions, let me know, because of, again, the tape is not as good. So I wish it would be, but we'll do our best. We'll do our best. So check this class out. Again, the master teacher this was the only time I think he ever did a class like this on A.M.O.M, on this particular subject matter. Okay. And just as a reiteration, A.M was one of the spiritual orders that we set up. So you had to be initiated into it. And these are some of the lessons. Now, this is on Scribes, just so you know. You look at the top here, Scribes. For those who don't know, I keep telling people you can get a lot of our books, download them for free on Scribes. They're right here. It's tons and tons of books people put up there. So I keep saying you definitely get access to the books on Scribes. So because I'm looking at this book right here, the A.M lesson. Okay. And just so you know. So let's see. I'm going to start the class, and if you guys have any questions throughout it, I'll address any questions as we go through the class.
With the so-called side of man. And that principle has always been raised amongst the ancient Israelis. One to call them that Semitic, one to call them that Tamara, whatever you want to call it. The principle is called math. It's the first principle of every order. It's a sacred guidance part called Wu-Sabat. It's translated as Karnak, Aswan. The sacred spot with the sacred temple was called Wu-Sabat. You hear me? And the symbol was called Mad. Mad is an often interpreted meaning justice. I think in the Islamic world, this interpretation of Mad became jihad. And those amongst them that were physical took jihad to mean physical war. And those amongst them called the Wu-Sabat or the Sufi took jihad to mean a spiritual struggle inside oneself against justice or injustice. Quran even said, injustice and partiality will not be tolerated. So the symbol raised is the author that you may have noticed in the hieroglyphs. Many of your ancestors or teachers had the symbol of the author, and that's called math. That's the foundation of all the mystical orders worldwide. Be they Native Americans, Freemasons, SCAs, Magus, Knights of Columbus, Shriners, Theosophical Society, Ascara, Rosicrucian, all go back to the math. This is why they say one of the first things he created was the quill. The quill, which is the page with all the inscriptions of the deity Tahuti, was the author that the prophet was used to scribe to write the many books of ancient Egypt that most people may have forgotten. But that was our symbol. Remember that symbol, math. It represents the struggle within inside. The reason why they chose the feather, because the feather is a very sturdy object, but in wind it fluctuates. But it was thrown with the wind. You notice the Native Americans put feathers on the island to make it straighten.
Let me just say this real quick. The master teacher is explaining that our culture is based on math. Okay, and we talk about that in the intro of all of our discussions. So I want to make that very clear. Our whole society was always based on Ma'at. The Natharu, our ancestors, lived based on the principles of Ma'at. And it's about balance. balance within your own personal life, balance within your physical body, between your health and everything else, balance within your society. Because in order, and when you have balance, you have justice. When you have balance, you have justice, right? And so justice begets balance, and balance begets order. And this is how you have a society, a lifestyle based on order. And so the principles of Ma'at was the whole basis of our culture. And we learned how to live according to the principles of Ma'at based on the wisdom of the Hutri. Now, the wisdom of the Hutri stood for teaching us about existence, about nature, and the principles of nature. And once we learned those principles, we adhered to those principles based on the principles of Ma'at. So I wanted to, make that clear. And this is what the master teacher was emphasizing to us, so that everyone is clear when it comes to our culture and how our ancestors lived.
Egypt, that same similar, there was an experience of how came about through these troubled times, these winds. We call them sentimental winds of life. The pressures come down. The person has a strong inner side, survive. The person has a weak inner side, or the weak side. Always. Those people, principles in the Wapo are based on spiritual things. It's about anything. He says those people who were Ansar spiritual, regardless of where the surface went, they were still Ansar. Whether we were calling ourselves Hebrew, or Nawapi, Native American, or Cowboy, whatever we call ourselves, because their roots in what we were doing was in the spiritual, not in the physical appearance of being a Muslim, wearing a tawhid, wearing the identity. That wasn't where they were at. They were there spiritual. They were a cosmos. They were a part of the cosmos.
Okay, let me just stop this. This is very important. You guys get this. The master teacher is explaining he had having two types of students. Those students who were there because of our spiritual teachers and our spiritual doctrine. And so he was trying to explain to us is that it didn't matter how we was changing our culture, the different cultural principles we were living by, regardless of the different schools of thoughts we went through. Everything, for those who understood it, all of our schools were based on spiritual development. And so, but you had certain students who, again, like I said before, they were materialists, and so they got caught up in the principle, or how can I say, in the culture per se, or I guess they didn't. A lot of people don't. What's the best way to say that? A lot of people who come into our doctrine, unfortunately, neglect the spiritual aspects of it. That's why you have individuals who call themselves Nawapians, but they won't call themselves Sabaeans, and they won't read none of the new books. And they question whether or not the master teacher wrote it or not. And guys, it's not even relevant whether the master teacher wrote it or not. What is relevant is it the truth? Are we teaching the truth? Because this is what the master teacher stood on. Is it the same doctrine? Now, if there's changes in our doctrine, then we can discuss some changes that may be. But this is why I pride myself on trying to show all levels of our doctrine. I start with the very beginning books that the master teacher put out back in the 60s, all the way to what we're teaching today, the actual facts. I show the correlation between everything that we teach, so that people will see the doctrine really has not changed. It really has not changed. If you really understand the principles and the concepts that we're teaching, it's all the same, So I think it's easy to see that if you're approaching our doctrine from the spiritual concepts, as opposed to, I'm a Nawat being with a B and not a Nawat P with a P, or I'm not into Wu-Sabat. I don't know what that means. You got people saying those things, and they're getting caught up in the names and stuff like that. And that's not as important as one spiritual development, And so I have to make that point. It's what the master is trying to explain in this class, in this lesson. So we'll get started. Let's go. Let's continue.
That word that stirs inside is one. You anchor to the word. And the foundation of the word is true or false. False manifests in the physical. Truth always is spiritual. You can't lie in the spirit. You cannot lie to your soul, but you cannot lie to yourself. That's why in the language, Hebrew had nothing and Arabic nothing. And you had combined the word spirit and self as one word. You do not lie to you. Do not betray your spirit yourself. You tell yourself the truth. For you are your best master, but you are your best God. Because you cannot lie to God. And the only being that you can contact you cannot lie to is yourself. And God therefore becomes the judge of the judge. That's why he said, I am that I am. He repeated, I am twice. I am that I am. He said, oh, I am that which I am. I am whom I am. And then in 5 says, our God is our being and his inner being. He never told his name. When you ask his name, say, I am that I am. You have to learn the principle that I am that I am. That means what you see is what you hear. It's very simple. It sounds complicated. It turns into all these different mystical interpretations in the Kabbalah of the Jews. It simply means I am that I am. No more, no less. So cosmos, if we're going to spend this evening before we go into the ritual, is to ask some questions about the spiritual. Be careful, because there's several levels here of cosmosis. Everybody's not on the same level. So you can't ask any questions. You're expecting to answer questions from the white or black level, and then the crimson level, to give answers to lessons they haven't studied yet, or degrees they haven't gotten into. So you have to be wise enough to have the question vague enough that I can answer it vague enough in order not to probe into what is not ready for certain people who have not been ready. All right? Any questions? I know one thing everybody keeps asking me, I really have this, is in our principles it says you gotta take a long walk on a short path. And you say, what do you mean by that? What it means is, I said that way back in 1970. What I mean by that is we had a very short period of time to take a long walk. It takes most people a lifetime to be just a Christian, or a lifetime to be a Jew, or a lifetime to be an Egyptologist. And I said, well, between now and 1970 and the year 2000, we have 30 years. You got to take a long walk on a short path. The short path was 30 years. The long walk was the amount of information, the amount of schools of thought that you would have to go through to be transformed from mortal immortality, and transformed back into God, back into deity, back into nothing. That was a long journey on a very short path. That's what it meant. If you want to put cosmos, you've got to learn to take a long walk on a short path. And most of you who walk within the years have got so much information that it baffles the normal pedestrian when they encounter you on the street. How could you possibly know that much information? The answer is, well, I took a long walk on a short path. You're still on just one of the long path.
That wasn't me. It's a break in the tape, so I don't know why.
Short end of the stick. Any questions?
All right, just real quick. And so the master teacher here is talking about, he taught us the concept of taking a long walk on a short path, and that long walk is our spiritual development. Our spiritual development, the transformation as we teach, transforming us back into gods and goddesses by teaching us how to reopen our third eye and be able to connect with the higher dimensional realms. That was the whole goal, and that's the whole goal of our whole doctrine he's explaining. And so that short period of time is 30 years. Because you got to keep this in mind. We had zero spiritual knowledge when he started to educate us in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s and so on and so forth. And so, that it was a long way to go trying to raise us up consciously. to resurrect our minds of who and what we are and what our capabilities are. And so this has always been the mission. And so it is imperative that anyone who's a student of the master teacher understands what his goal is, his objectives are, his focus is. This is why I talk about it as so much, because this is what he's constantly putting in the books, and this is what he's verbally taught us. And so everyone should be on the same page. Okay, so now he's going to have some people ask some questions. So this one brother is going to ask a question. I think I'm the second person to ask a question in this, in the very beginning here. So just listen up, guys.
Yeah. Thank you so much. What do we do about the knowledge we just get? Like, the people that came and we need to do also.
Again, that's a break in the tape.
That's such a good question.
For those who did not hear the question, the brother was asking a question: what do people? This was 1998, and so we for the first 20 years, from 1970 up until 1991, 92, we were identified as Ansars, the Ansar or Allah, under the school of Islam, Sufi Islam, by way of the Sudanese Islam, I should say, or ancient Egyptian Islam, be honest with you. So that was a school of thought we were under for the first 20 years. And then we transitioned and identify ourselves as Nuwapians. And so the brother was asking, well, what about people who didn't know those schools of thought? They're just coming into the organization, and they didn't have all of that, knowledge. How do they make this transformation that the master teacher was talking about? He's like, what do they do for newcomers, people who are new to this? And so I make this point very clear, because there's a lot of you guys who are new, who've come into this information within the last year or the last 5 years or the last 10 years, and who never even got to meet the master teacher, never got to question the master teacher, never got to sit in any of his classes. And so listen up for individuals who are like that. Pay attention to his response to that answer.
Because what I found out, that you have two.
It's a break, guys. It's going to come back on.
Types of old times. I used to say years ago, old times are faithful but not true. You have two types of old times. Those that were rooted in the community physically, and again, those that were rooted in the community spiritually. Those that are rooted in the community spiritually have a lot of spiritual insight of things they learned from me over the years. And that's their eternity. Those that are rooted in the community physically were looking at me the way Musa looked at El-Qadir and thought they knew what they were looking at. Thought they were figuring out what I was doing. And as we get down this far, some of them look over now and see they never really understood the man they were talking to. You follow? So some of you people who just got here will never be able to have those schools. And you should have had by now spiritual masters raised amongst us who had taken that long walk on the first path and been able to come and instruct y'all in the many experiences that they went through while walking that path with me. Unfortunately, so many of them didn't, because their hearts were there. They were just here, physically. They were just spiritual. They never really heard the message. You with me? So we missed that. Those experiences. It doesn't mean, believe me, that old times are good. It's not true. Both of them are faithful, like I said, but they're not true. They're the first ones stabbing the back. Follow? Because they were not groomed to be true. They came out of the world of dishonesty and self-preservation and self-righteousness and ego was the way forward. And introduced them to a culture like Ansar Allah tried to do, is like displaying themselves in the world and the family and everything else. There, so most of them couldn't do it. They only the training they did while they were Ansar and enjoying the children. Told not to do. They never really got the spiritual side. outside of what I was teaching. And we opened the Sons of the Green Light years ago to the Sufi, and we started and had to stop because people were taking the message and giving their loved ones. Passing to their wife, it was not right, so it's okay. It was my husband, so it's okay. And the spiritual masters came to me and said, they are dishonoring these secrets, they're not keeping them sacred. So we must go underground again. And that's why it's exposed. And we hope in this time it will come forth again, short of time, a little bit of time, to get the job done. But it's time for us to live. And if people here can keep the secrets safe, then things will be revealed to them. As of now, I haven't really opened the doors. The ancient Egypt tree was giving me the secrets that we have kept sacred for so long to us. Knowledge that you're supposed to know about yourself and how it all happened. I haven't done it ever yet. I talk about history, I talk about science, I talk about the creation and destruction of the world. But I haven't put that elite group aside and passed on those secret words, the words that Asif wanted from rock so bad. The secret words the Freemasons are trying to get, that gives you the power to live. You can't pass it on to people live. And you'll know when you're ready when you become your own judge. Right? So it doesn't make no difference if you're 20 years or 20 minutes. If you're intended to do the right thing, intended to work by spirit and not by body, intended to involve, become a part of the reins of the sun's life. It'll be easy. You won't have missed nothing. But if you come here, you just want to be part of a mystical order that makes you feel spiritual. You don't think you don't follow instructions, you don't do anything to subscribe to in lessons, then you just waste your mind and your time. And it's just something else to do. In the Freemason law, there are those who are serious, and there are those who just buy their way through 3 degrees. Well, you just read them and they just walk around the explanation, the range, and the symbol, and they don't even have a clue of the secrets and the hidden meanings of these things. None whatsoever. But they think they do, they go to fraternity, they go to the lodge meetings, they go to conventions, they put on an apron, they put on the 3 great lights, they put their Bible compasses square, and they learn certain of the triad terms they use, from degree to degree as they raise, but they don't none of it, and they never pass the world off and they turn right. They pass the world off and you hit with a light in your eye. And that light I spoke about several times is a blinding light.
Let me stop right there real quick. So again, he's talking about, or he said that you could have been a student for 20 years or 20 minutes. It does not matter if you were into the spiritual aspect of our doctrine. But if you're a materialist, as he's saying, those who are physical, those types of students have a hard time in our doctrine, and they really don't get the principles of what the whole mission is about. This is what the master teacher was trying to explain. So I repeat, whether you was in this doctrine for 20, 30, 40 years or 20 minutes, if you come into this and take advantage of the spiritual principles that he was explaining, you actually do the things that we were teaching. And he's going to go into that even in more detail. But I wanted to make that clear. And this is what he was trying to explain in regards to answering that question about individuals who are who was new into the information then, and people who are new into this doctrine today. It's the same principles. And again, this is why I focus on spirituality so much in my discussions and lessons. Now, as far as the question that was asked by Akeem, let's see, in what years were the school of thought was the Egyptian Church of Kodas? The Egyptian Church of Kodas, the master teacher, began to introduce that to us in like 2000. I would say the middle of 2000, 2001, if I stand corrected, but around 2000. I forget exactly when, but that's when he introduced the Egyptian Church of Kodas to us, around that timeline. 2000, 2001. I vividly remember 2001 because 2001 is when I relocated from up north to the south here in Georgia. And I remember that clearly. We were focusing on the Egyptian Church of Kodas because brothers like myself who've been in the doctrine for some time, we were kind of bewildered by it because we started talking about Jesus and God and this and that. And we was trying to figure, well, why does the master focus on Christianity so much again? We already went through those schools. But, again, because we transferred from the north to the south, I think that the South is the Bible Belt. And so a lot of our people were under the Christian schools, and they didn't have access to a lot of the type of knowledge that was going on in the northern part of the country, the Northeast, I should say, up New York, New Jersey area. So the master had to focus on trying to assist the brothers and sisters here in the South who, for the most part, were Christian, And I think that's where some of the Egyptian Turks of Kras comes from. Not to mention Kras, that whole thing, Christianity leads us back into Egypt, because that is the origin of Christianity. The Mukasa, the Caucasian, they obviously plagiarized an Egyptian doctrine. So it was almost like killing two birds with one stone, where the master was able to address the Christian doctrine, but from Egyptian perspective, because we was teaching it from an Egyptian perspective. That's the key. Very important for no one to get confused about it. Okay. All right. So let's keep going. So again, he was just addressing that question about what do you do for people who are new. Now he's going into just talking about the different types of students. He was comparing Freemasonry, and what you have people who come into Freemasonry who are serious about it and they follow the lessons, versus people who come into Freemasonry and they just want to get their degrees in them, but they don't really understand the principles. And so he's trying to explain the principles of Freemasonry. Listen up. And just so you know, my question, I'm going to ask it next.
This side of intellect, light is blind. And the way the teachers do it,
that's just a break in tape.
About the light. Tell them the light is the knowledge, the light is the intelligence, the light is the intellect, the light is the guide, the light is the way, the light is this. But light blinds. Darkness don't blind. And all Freemasons are blindfolded. As I mentioned this yesterday. And while they're blindfolded, in that period that they're waiting in the lodge, and someone remove that blindfold, the inquisitive mind starts to work. In the darkness, the mind starts to speed up, it starts to race. What's going on? What's going to happen? What's coming up next? What's going to do this? What's that sentence? What's this here? Wood? You understand? Why the table closed? Why my legs? One cancer? Why this? Why that? You follow? That's the divine. Once they remove the blindfold, then they're blind. And give them with the light of Freemasonry. They start giving them the principles of Freemasonry. They start giving them the tools of Freemasonry. And you put the Bible in there, and you point down the altar, and you open the Bible, and there they can compass and square. And you look down and say, these are three great lights. And you look down. When I shall the three candles that surround the altar, and those are real three great lights. When you have the person look down, you point down, he looks down, looking away from the three candles that represent the three suns, they know right there that he is blinded by the light. And that light is the compass and the square. And how did it build his Bible around him and reshape him from a God into a mere man. Okay? So in our order, all the symbolism, all the tools that we use, all are geared towards being able to see in dark and avoid the beam of the light. Okay? Yes. See? See the word? See the word enlightenment? I'm just saying, see how they did it? I'll tell you what. When you get to the point in the enlightenment, that in all that you read and all that you studied, you still feel there is what's the word? Say it again. A void. What follows void in the Bible? Void and darkness. Once you finish all the studies, all the religious dogma, all the arguments of who was there first,
Let me stop right here. This is very important because I asked the question, well, how do you know once you become enlightened? And see, I didn't catch it when he was explaining that the light was the trick. That was what he was trying to explain about Freemasonry. But I wasn't even knowledgeable about Freemasonry at that time because, like I said, that was in 1998. We didn't even start the lodge back then, as of yet. And so I didn't have no knowledge of that type of information. I wasn't familiar with Freemasonry at all. I wasn't familiar with the concept of light and dark because we was always taught, anyone who studies any kind of spiritual knowledge from other people to this very day, they keep saying light, you got to be in the light, you got to be enlightened, you got to do this. And that's kind of where my question was coming from. And the master teacher was trying to explain that is the trick. The trick was to keep you in the light, where the goal is to go into the dark. And so he's going to explain in detail, the trick about the light and why we are the children of the night. We go into the darkness, and he's going to explain the significance of darkness and go into it. So this was a very important explanation and an introduction because, I was being introduced now into, okay, we're not searching for enlightenment. And guys, that's a very important point that all our people need to be mindful of because they're tricked by that in spiritual teachings. Everyone teaches that. And it's a deception. Okay, so keep that in mind. Well, let me start again.
Metaphysics, scientism, then you still are hungry for something. Well, that in the spiritual journey, from void into darkness, in darkness and tranquility. They taught you the spiritual darkness, the devil, the demon. See the reverse? And the light is right. The wrong, bathed in the light. In ancient Egypt, what they had were the three sons that you know as what? Chenet, Utu, and Asu. They had as Atum, Atun, and Amun. And those three lights that you see in the sonic lodge of the 73 candles, or even on the floor of our lodge, the Hoptep, the three candles. You only need to light a candle if you're in the ask about that. If you're in the dark, you're living, and the dark is ignorance, absence of intelligence, absence of common sense, evil. How do you have the intellect to know to strike the match? How do you know to light the candle to get the light if darkness is ignorance? So you see where deception came in. The beings that were in darkness knew about the light. People in light cannot see darkness. While you're on earth, when you look through the day, you know there's light, and right outside the earth's atmosphere, you know there's darkness. Which is more, the light that surrounds the planet or the darkness that is the universe? So which one would be more likely where the Supreme would dwell? In that the light that is contained and restrained within an atmosphere based on reflection, or in a boundless universe? In a boundless universe, where darkness is, but there must be intelligence. If that intelligence or if that darkness is transformed into light by combining hydrogen and helium atoms to make them create a cycle and create a sun, send out beams, exploding, create a solar system, there was some intelligence involved there. But that intelligence was in darkness, and the results were the light. So void and darkness was intelligence, because in the Bible it says what? What did it say before that? In the beginning, God created heaven and earth, and what? The void and darkness upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the surface of the water. God did. And through void and darkness upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the surface of the water, the Spirit of God was moving in, and then he said, let there be. And that's when he started the chain reaction of consideration. You know what I mean by that? God created and then had to stop to see whether it would be good. He looked and said, and he saw it. So So when things got into light, it did not necessarily mean that they were good, because God created these lights and then said, he saw that the light that he created was, so the light was not necessarily good, and that's why in Islam they had Nur and Nar, and Nur represented light, and Nar represented fire, and therefore that light was not necessarily good. It was always, as I said years ago, independent of how one uses it. You can strike a match to light a candle to die, or you can strike a match to burn down the house and kill everyone. There is temperament in life. There's no temperament in darkness where there is no attempt. Because in darkness, the only fear is tripping over something you don't know is there. So if you hold still, hold your peace in darkness, divine knowledge. So where there's light, there's doubt. Yeah? You'll know because your mind will reach a point where you start to say to yourself, there is more to know. There is more to know. And that hunger will cause the divine to come forward if you discipline yourself. Yeah? And there is more to know. It's not out of reach. It's out of trust.
Okay, real quick. So he explained that he was talking to me that I will know once I understand. You go into the darkness. He said, as you're doing those rituals and you're doing the things that you're being taught, the meditations and so on and so forth, in the dark, right? And learning to quiet one's mind. As you're doing that, then he was saying divine will manifest. In essence, this is how you begin to make contact with your oversoul that I talk about so much. It is the process of our consistency with the rituals. This is key. This is key. The problem becomes, we have not been able to achieve it. Now, I will say this, being in these particular types of classes the master teacher was giving us and the lessons that we were introduced to is what helped me in my spiritual development. But what I did not understand at that time, that the master began to teach us in the new doctrine, in the current doctrine, where he focused on a lot, is the concepts of the influences of spirit beings. Now he goes into it in this lecture. He talks about, he's been talking about spirit beings since the very beginning, since the 70s and so on and so forth. But we never had any books that goes into that. We didn't have any books that went into genetics. And so the master teacher in our current doctrine began to introduce us into, let me see where I have it. I brought it up. I have it. This type of information. Let's see. So he put out this book here, Genetic Kiss. This is Actual Facts number 109. And this goes into genetics and how bad genes, having bad genetics, give access to lower forces, spirit beings. Then he introduced us to this part, to that, the 30 spirits. How again you have disagreeable ancestors in your genetics, and they actually block you in your spiritual development. This is what has hindered me. And I believe this is what has hindered most students, not understanding the science of spirit being possession. He put out this book here, Feeding the Forces, the Actual Facts, Feeding the Forces, and how these negative spirit beings influence. It's what throws us off the path of righteousness. It interrupts your spiritual development. And this is why spiritual development has been so difficult for us over the years, because of not really understanding how spirit forces distract us, takes us off the path, it gets us into our addictions and things of that nature. And so it's one thing doing spiritual work. It's another thing fighting disagreeable spirit forces. And you first have to even acknowledge that you're being influenced or affected by these spirit forces, because most of our people have no clue that they're being affected like this. And they're not keen to how these spirit forces influence us in adverse ways that throw you off the path of righteousness. This is why, again, majority of the people aren't successful in developing themselves spiritually, or it's another reason why you got a lot of our people who are not even interested in spiritual development is because of these lower forces in their genes, in their bloodline, that have access to them. So I definitely wanted to make this a point because, yes, the master teacher was explaining to us the rituals and all of the things we need to do to develop ourselves spiritually. But the challenge has been is succeeding in that. And the reason why it's been so difficult for us over the years, and I'm speaking personally, is because of the spirit being influences, the negative spirit force influences. And these types of books that the master teacher began to introduce to us was so important. They're so vital, of understanding these things. And so it's a work in progress. It really is. And so when you're on a spiritual path, you have to understand spirit being influenced, negative spirit being influenced. You must be aware and cognizant of that. Okay, let me continue.
Has the secret thoughts from people that I know you later. They've been protected for thousands of years. There's nothing to do. Yeah? Yeah.
It's a break in the tape.
And this other word. So it's a good important doctrine. When you go to bed, sometimes it would make a difference, but once you go to sleep, you won't see the light going on anyway. It really doesn't make a difference. Those are religious mythologies created while you were in certain schools on that what? Short path, right? All these had to teach you the way they thought in order for you to digest those schools thoroughly and to teach you Islam as if I believed it. In order to get you to believe it. Because all it was about is belief. And then we had to get the purpose, we had no longer a need for beliefs. And also, here it says, don't sleep in God. Why? Because the monotheistic principle, which is the principle of the physical, what was void of any spiritual knowledge, is always consumption by fire due to judgment. In this case, the God of light is not using it for intellect, he's using it as nar, fire. The word they use in the Torah, which they borrowed from the Sumerians, was or, flame, light, in the sense of burning. So this God warns you that if you are not obedient to me, out of whatever other gods that you chose, I will burn you up. You hear me? And you're taught that in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. If you're not obedient to me, on Judgment Day, I will judge you and I will burn you up. So the principle of monotheistic beliefs is fear of being burnt up, being consumed by fire. Meanwhile, they teach you, dwell in the light, stay away from the darkness of ignorance, dwell in the light, and then tell you at the end of the road that we're going to burn you up if you don't do everything the way I say do it. Well, it's right because you dwell in the light, and it's the sun and the environment that ages and kills you. So you're already in that path if you are a physical being. If you are a spiritual being, then you spend the short time that you walk under the sun's rays to raise yourself spiritually past the care of the physical body. And it'll care for itself. It'll sustain you if you stop patronizing it and flattering it and gorging it and stuffing it and painting it and all the different things you do to it, where it becomes incapable of performing for itself. You name your own body. Your body is just a vehicle to carry the spiritual you through this earthly journey. And you're supposed to be raising yourself in degrees spiritually, so that by the time you take the garment of flesh off, the rest of the path is easy. You just blend back into the radiance. You know what I'm saying? So it's not best to sleep in dark or light or dark. Because regardless, when you go into that state, past sleep paralysis, into what they call sleep, you don't see anything. And if anything is going to attack you, it's because you allow it to, and you believe it can. Right? Yes. Does lucid dreaming or waking sleep have to do with a certain state of consciousness? lucid dreaming, or it's called waking sleep, have to do with a certain state of consciousness. Yeah, it has to do more so with the vibrations of the body. The body is vibrating at a certain pace. That's why you have people say, when I'm getting ready to go into a transcendental state, I'm going to drop my body down to alpha wave. Now, why would they go to the first letter of the Greek alphabet, which would be Alif or Aleph or A? Why would they say, so where is man vibrating? When man is vibrating an eighth up, he's vibrating at an octave above. And he has to make that journey down to alpha wave, where his body therefore is in tune with the Om. You follow that?
All right, let me break there real quick. This is a very important point. The brother was asking about lucid dreaming and what that is, and the master is trying to explain that those who are able to lucid dream, because lucid dreaming is a prelude to being able to travel out of body. And what happens is that the vibration of the body is dropping down. Now, this is a very important point because this is something that the master teacher has been focusing on a lot in the current information. We went over this before if you look at the actual scroll that we put out called the Mafkuzet. The Mafkuzet. This was the Master Secrets number 5. The Secret of Tones and the Mafkuzat, the Elixir of Life. And so he has this diagram here. First, he was explaining that the body is vibrating on oxygen, right? As humans, we breathe oxygen. So we're vibrating at this density level, and you have to drop down to 1, which is hydrogen, which is the alpha, right? And this is what happens. You know, in essence, you're transcending from your physical, right, focusing on the physical body and shifting to your spiritual body or your spirit body, and that's going into the A.M.O.M. This is the goal of every student, is to learn how to do this, and he's going to explain that. That's the whole point of all of our lessons in the Om and the ancient Egyptian order. The lessons, the whole point of the lessons is to introduce the rituals on how to drop down from this, from the physical, the material essence of us into the spiritual essence, to how to make that flip. He's going to go into that. And so it is imperative that you guys are familiar and understand these concepts. And so again, like I said, the brother is asking about lucid dreaming and the science behind that. And so the master is trying to explain what that process is, why that information is important. So definitely pay attention to the explanation as he goes into that more in depthly.
Now, in between everybody knows the octave is 8 tones, right? In that, let's say, progression of sound going down, there are other beings who are able to vibrate in and out. And those beings that within your dream, because while you're dreaming, you start dropping down. Have you ever listened to a cat when a cat is sleeping, how it purrs? You ever heard a cat? Anybody have owned a cat before? And a cat purrs when they sleep? You know, so you purring sound? That's what they're dropping down. Human beings usually drop no farther than out of 8 to 4, so they stay in what's called sleep paralysis. They're in a paralyzed state, and oftentimes, if they wake up at that point before their body has regressed from 1 to start to getting back up to waking up, they'll wake up and their body will still be asleep, and their eyes will open and they will be paralyzed. Thus, the term sleep paralysis. And in that state, the body panics, and it goes to the brain and shoots directly to the hippocampus area of the brain and starts to find solutions to things on this side and that side at the same time, and plus hallucination begins. People start to hallucinate, start to have visions of things that they create or have experienced themselves. Remember, man is a creator and plus a designer. So he can design monsters to terrorize him, or angels to guide him. He can fly as high as he wants, to swim as long as deep as he wants in that world. In that world, at the 4th level, coming down from the 8 octaves. You follow that? So it does definitely have to do with a mental state, which has to do with the vibrational level of the human being. Human beings have to learn to travel that octave back and forth at random. And that's what A.M.O.M wants to teach people, how man starts at the 8th, starts at 7th, and 6th, and 5, and it's all the way down. At any given time, you can go into alpha, as they call it. You follow it, and your body just curves. Your heart starts to slow up. You breathe less, and then you start to make that transit state. If you get all the way down to 1, you're with you? Then you can get a new boost. Just like when you're extremely tired because you stayed up for 2 days, you find at the 48th hour, you get, or 20 to the 24th hour, you get a boost. And you get this, what they call a second breath. You're working on ether. Now, you're no longer working on blood. That extra boost you get when you're extremely tired and driving, all of a sudden you say, I gotta wake up. Boom, you can surge, you're able to drive another 100 miles. That's moving into ether. When you learn to take this journey backwards, back into yourself, you follow the journey inward, when you get down to 1, when you learn to vibrate there, then it's easy for me to take you over into the ether world. Because on the other side of this 1, hydrogen existence starts 1 ether. And all the way up to 8. When you get to, in the element sense, watch what happens. In the element sense, it's from hydrogen to 8. And 8 is oxygen. You see that? A gas is formed. So when you come down from 8 to 1 and go up to ether, when you get to 8 ether, you make a transformation into Ethereum form. Another gaseous form. Another form of gas. And you'll be able to travel that ladder backwards and forward. And if anything begins to happen to you on the physical plane, between 8 and 1, all you do is drop your vibrational level and transport your essence into the etheric world and wait to see what happens in the physical. If the physical body becomes damaged to the point where you no longer use it, but you have a job to do, you're able to pick anyone from your family who can vibrate on the same type of blood, or the liquid is oxygen, water, H2O, same kind of blood as yours. You can jump into their body to get a certain assignment done. Oftentimes, relatives will come back to a person in their family who they think or vibrate the same, and the person has become afraid of seeing this gaseous etheric image in their room, and the adrenaline produces a serum that cuts off or builds a gate where this walk-in cannot get into your body. So your grandmother came back to get a message to someone who needed them, comes to your bed, at the head of your bed, but then she turns to leave. She just says, I'm well, everything is fine, because you closed the gate through fear. You probably have to learn that monotheism created fear to cut you off from the spiritual world. Their whole philosophy, their whole doctrine of religion is based on stay afraid, fear Allah, fear the Lord, fear retribution, fear hell, fear judgment, fear. You understand? So you don't stay in a celestial state, a bliss state. You stay in an ever regretful state, because it's near impossible as a predominantly physical being most of the time not to do disagreeable things. Right? And once you do a disagreeable thing, and the law is if you do one sin, you're going to hell, you inherit a new, more dreadful attribute, guilt. And enough guilt will make you say, what difference does it make? I'm already going to hell. I'm already a bad person. I'm already a disagreeable person. So I might as well not try to make it through the back. And that could not be far from the truth. Once you learn not to fear, once you take on the role of God and take on responsibilities for your body and your soul and your spirit, those 3 great principles, that's the 3 great sins. When you conquer them, you conquer all. And you can make that journey back and forth. That's what A.M.O.M is about. A.M.O.M is not.
That's a break.
Journey back and forth. That's what A.M.O.M is about. A.M.O.M is not. You study books and you may have got boards and on. I've been reading A.M.O.M. I don't see them reading any spiritual, because it's about waiting until the people who join A.M.O.M because they want to transcendental meditation journey get fed up and leave. And those people who want to stay will be here and they'll be down business. You follow me? Anything else? Did I answer your question? Now you have to know that you're in the dark now and I'm in the light. And so you wait for me to recognize where you're at. I won't.
When you concentrate and you're getting up from concentration, is a way to stay focused and leaving your thinking?
No, because let me tell you what. But when you sit down to concentrate, which is meditation over 30 times, the moment you make the intention in your mind to change position, you must break the chain of thought. Because you have to think, well, I'm going to get up and go in a chair. So it means you got to start all over again. If you try to get up and pick up where you were at, it's impossible because you put a new thought in between. That was, I got to get up. Oh, where's the chair? That's more. That chair's more comfortable. I'll sit over there. Or I'll sit over there. I'm looking at my blood because my mother's been soft. It hurt my ankle. And then hurt comes in. Hurt links to a whole bunch of things in the subconscious mind. What's hurt before I fell out of the street? I'm not a kid. I got hurt. I hit my baseball. Or I hit somebody crying. Are they hurting? You follow? And the mind is so powerful, it works so fast, and you start to digest that information so quickly that you're off that path. You got to start all over again. You got to sit down in the middle, meditate, right? And then start to contemplate and rebuild it again. Believe you me, it's worth the time. If you're too lazy to give that much, that extra moment to it, then you're really not entitled to the reward.
You just explained the traveling from the 8 octave back down to
remember, I used octave because I was using something I was hoping everybody would understand, which is the tones and music. Okay? Middle C would be the most destructive.
Okay, now when you explain that, what certain exercises would you suggest to get you able to vibrate on? We're able to travel from the 8 octave back down to the 1.
That's what A.M.O.M is teaching. We just started now. I've just introduced you to this tone of Om. This tone Om in the human voice is a replica of the sound of the multiple big bangs that took place. Different explosions in the universe. When they finish exploding, and that's why I might say babies go kheh, kheh. That's why they go ga, 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 ga. They remember that vibration as they were coming into existence. And they can hear the universe from the other side. And you hear things rubbing to create friction, to create sparks, to create life. And you hear kheh. That's why you use the word kheh for creation in Hebrew as well as in Arabic, which is correct, as usually from the Sumerian doctrine. Or khat in Egypt means that dead body, khat. That existing thing waiting for transformation. Right? A.M.O.M is supposed to teach you this gradual transformation. First, I've got to teach you how to sit down and focus your energies, conquer the material world and the things that surround you that seem to be so important to you. That's one. Or to give you the power to be able to click it off because you're in a whirlwind of many things you have to do, but be able to have a certain tone or note in your mind that when you hear it, be it Om, it automatically starts you on that journey.
Guys, and let me make a reiterate the master teacher is trying to explain this was the purpose of the lessons, why he was given those Om lessons, why we were given the Sons of the Green Light lessons, and why we were given the ancient Egyptian order lessons. All of these were spiritual lessons that was designed to teach us spiritual practices to achieve what he's trying to explain, being able to drop yourself down, as he was explaining, from vibrating at your physical density, right, based on the 8 on periodic table he was explaining, down to alpha. Okay, that is a process, and you learn that, or you develop that through the consistency in the rituals. Unfortunately, like I said, this class was back in 1998. The master was kidnapped 4 years later. He never got to really focus on doing these things with us as groups, which is what his goal was, because he was taken. So it was up to us now to master these things, because we were given the instructions on what to do, how to do it, and why we're doing these things. The goal is for us to achieve it, you know, and this has been the greatest challenge for students, for those students who are spiritually inclined, is for us to achieve the ultimate goal of total resurrection, which is what, you know, the whole focal point of our doctrine. So I want to make that clear, because he's trying to explain this is what the lessons were about. This is what all of the teachings, the spiritual teachings he was giving us. And so he was giving us the teachings in the books. And the whole point was to come, because these classes, we used to have to come on the land, and these classes took place on Thursday nights. And so we would come there on Thursday nights for these particular type of classes. Like I said, this was the only class that I know of that actually only focused on this particular type of lessons, the A.M.O.M lessons, where the master was going into details about these spiritual concepts, and all. And so it was meant to carry on, but unfortunately, there were just, I don't know, distractions. And we couldn't carry on the you know, those lessons, teachings, or one-on-one that he was doing with us, because we was getting one-on-one teachings with the master. And so, you know, right now we're in a state where we have to master these things, you know, on our own accord. So that's, you know, very important. You know, so let me keep going. So I just want you guys to be clear on where this discussion was going, what this discussion was all about. Let's keep going.
Well, this is a process of learning. It's not about saying, tell me exactly what I can say, so tomorrow I can put it on. It did make the transition. When you got down to the fourth octave, you got down to the fourth note within that octave, all kind of demons that are in your subconscious mind that have been planted in there by the...
Okay, let me stop. This is a very important point I need you guys to listen to. He was trying to explain, because the brother in the question, obviously the brother was trying to figure out, you know, how do we achieve this? Kind of what my question was too. How do you know when you become enlightened? So the master was saying the purpose of the lessons and what he's trying to teach us are very important. We understand the concepts. He said, because I can't just tell you something like some magic word or some trick where you do it automatically, because if you were to do these things automatically, right, you will be possessed. He was basically saying because of their spirit forces in us. And see, this is what I was saying before. Didn't understand that concept. I didn't understand the concept of spirit being possession, of the different, you know, because of our genetics have been so messed up over these centuries. We don't understand. We have negative spirits that influence us. And the master was trying to explain that. So he's going to go into kind of in detail, trying to explain how we're influenced by negative images, the negative things through the media, and so on and so forth. And spirit beings take advantage of those things. But listen on.
The media intentionally. Every monster that you've ever been taught to believe is real and did as a child before the mind of logic and evaluation.
That's a break. He's going to come back.
To grow while you were still in an imagination state. Every little creature you saw and everything you envisioned, you believe it or not, you stored it in your heart as real. And these are the things that you shape to create your nightmares now that you're a grown man. You just make them a little more sophisticated than they were when you saw them on television. It might have just been a headless creature that was chasing around Daffy Duck in a cartoon. When you digested, or a headless horseman who scared people with a lantern and no head through Halloween, these things stayed inside you. In your essence. You follow that? And they're dormant, waiting to come out. And you can combine them the way you take Mr. Potato's heads and put little pieces together. You can put little pieces of memories of fear and traumatize yourself. So you just can't go jumping back there. That's what happens to many people who join these meditation groups, and they're on a very high spiritual level because their mothers and fathers genetically were high spiritual people. And they get there and they get possessed. Or they go to a Pentecostal church and they get possessed. Or they go to a Yoruba meeting and get possessed. Or to Santeria and they get possessed at a Shango meeting. Or spiritual Shango Baptist, spiritual Baptist in the island. They get possessed the first day. Other people sit there and say, why is it not bothering me? I'm not getting the Holy Ghost. How come I'm not foaming them up? How come I'm not? You understand? Those people were able to make that leap because somewhere within their 4 generations on both sides, which is 8 again, 4 in the mother and 4 in the father, somewhere in that period, coming over this way, somebody was very spiritual, or someone dove into Shango, or someone dove into Yoruba, or someone dove into Voodoo or Bodé. Someone dealt with some of these things in your family, and they had opened the porthole in your genes for an embodied soul to step in. And they haunt you and they torment you until you learn psychic self-defense, and how to go back down that channel or that semi-vortex and patch that hole up. So it's something that has to be taught to you gradually. So while you're learning to open this channel, you're also learning psychic self-defense. So you become a spiritual warrior when you get back there. But there's beings you will have to fight off this in your mind. This is why Native Americans often tell people when you're in a sweat lodge and they're going through these, they're smoking these peyote, they take them on these journeys, and in these journeys they come up against demons and monsters, and they'll tell the chief or Maku will tell them this is the demon that's inside you. These are illusions. You've got to defeat them. But when you're standing there, you see a mountain lion perched on a mountain getting ready to leap on you. And you got to remember that you were taught by your Maku or your shaman, whoever, that this is an illusion that you're creating. And it'll get more ferocious as your fear increases. And once you overcome that, then that mountain lion disappears. And then you start a little further down and you come across a tremendous rattlesnake. And you're cornered by this rattlesnake. Because you have seen movies in your lifetime where people were caught and trapped by rattlesnakes, and you said, what would I do? And the moment you added the I in it, you planted it in your subconscious mind as being a part of your life. What would I do if Godzilla came over the mountain? You've now instilled Godzilla in your mind forever. What would I do if Dracula had me cornered? What would I do if the Wolfman was chasing me through the woods? And that's why they make these kind of movies. But they know as God that you're constantly taking that unshaped ashlar and bringing it into a shaped ashlar, taking an uncut stone or a heap of mud and constantly cutting bricks to build this strong character. And in that they must inflict, or they must implant all of these kind of thoughts that deviate. They take you off the path. They work with us from power. They work with us with lust. They work with us with greed. They implant all things in us that interfere with that direct path. You know what I'm saying? So you have to take that journey gradually, step by step, so that you also put on, as the Father would say, you put on the armor of God. You see, because you're going to fight the dragon. You become a dragon slayer. But you are the architect. You are the fashioner and the shaper and the former of the dragon. And only you can overcome the dragon when you give back the world of illusion. It's a battle. You can definitely overcome. Yes, anyone?
My question was, when you refer to stepping back from the physical and looking at your body or what's happening just a play, should we step back as far to look at ourselves from above and see our physical body, or should we look at it from inside out, look at the body as far as this isn't me, where he's saying the mind will be his eyes and not me, and the other things that you said, as far as should we step back as far as look at ourselves from above and try and control our bodies like a play master, or just let it happen?
No, you have to take control of it. But saying it is written in a book, so I can introduce the thought. Saying it from the book will not make it happen. It's just when I say something like, this is what you must do, this is written so that you can get an idea of what you must do. You can't read that and use that as a means for which to accomplish it. You know what I'm saying? You then have to learn the path of finding yourself, of turning yourself inside out, of making that inner journey. And believe you me, for lack of a better word, you're not that far away spiritually from what you want. Otherwise, you would not have been led to this position. You wouldn't be sitting there right now aspiring to find out the people out there that are rolling endlessly in the Las Vegas mind. You're nowhere near where you're trying to come. So some part of your gene, be it family or whatever, is leading you towards this path for a reason. Don't try to solve it all at one time. This is the first time that I'm even talking to people of A.M.O.M one-on-one. Most of the time, I'm preaching fire and brimstone about the coming calamities of the world. And I didn't put time aside for the spiritual people, but I was busy trying to reap the harvest of the physical people to get them ready. And I find out so many of them are wasted. They're so caught up in that world, it's a waste of time. It's time to focus on you. That told me, that said something, that said, the spiritual sons and daughters are gathering. The physical people will gather here every Saturday night. But if you can gather here on Saturday night and be that spiritual person, you will. You gather here only on Saturday night but have no concern about the spiritual, you're dead. You know what I'm saying? This is just the first time. There's going to be more things happening. More was supposed to happen today with your alignment. Max is supposed to be sit out in the grass in circles of 9. You're supposed to have certain chants so you can learn the chant. You start getting your body ready for that transition. But nature says it's not ready yet. And we're trying to build a spiritual circle. And we have to wait until so it rains. We can't put the mats down like you're sitting in water, but we can sit and we can talk and prepare ourselves. It's a journey more than just a little bit to read in the Bible. Not far. It's about being ready. Alright? How many people did fast? That's good enough. You're starting. You see? Yeah, somebody wants to say something?
Okay, so I'm about to ask my second question. So you want to pay attention. It's an interesting question or discussion that we have. So you may want to pay attention to this.
Is there a reason why at the age of myself, around 5 to 6, I'm around agile, and I said to myself, they don't know you. And ever since then, I've been looking for a master. I thought I was influenced by I used to be into martial arts, watching karate flicks, and I would see these Shaolin monks and the things they were able to do. Or you doing television. Right. You haven't seen none of them do it in reality. No, I'm saying, I studied martial arts many years too. And you go all the way over there, you'll never see none of them jump up with trees to 30 feet tall. You only see them in Disney movies. And when I went over there to study, I wanted to see them do the things that I saw, catch a bullet in your hands and all that kind of stuff. I was told that's not real, that's a movie. After I paid to fight over there. And so, within me, I said, well, wow, why is it that all these people around me don't really seem to know anything? So, from that point on, I started on my journey searching for a master. And, spiritual master. Right. So you are a master. For a spiritual master or God, as you say. And so, boom, at the age of 19, I stumbled onto you. No one told me. I just went looking. I woke up and it's like, I have to find this individual. And I said to myself, first person I come to, I'm going to go to them and ask them, where can I find that something in Islam? And I saw a brother and wife. And I said, well, where are you guys based at? And he told me, Brooklyn. I said, fine, how do I get there? He told me how, and I went there. And I said, how do I learn? How do I become a part of this? What is this? And they laughed kind of. Don't you know what you're getting into? I said, well, no, but I know that some, I'm looking. And so I said, fine, that's when they gave me my shahada. And so on and so forth. And then as, I've gone throughout my life, there's certain things that occur to me that I don't know if it's my mind doing it or what. Whether people experience it or not. Which is, so many times throughout my life, I'll see something, and as if I lived it, I ended my life, and I got a fresh start, and I started from that point on. And it keeps happening. It keeps happening as if my whole life ended, I lived and died, and then I started from that point on. And it constantly is going throughout my whole life. I mean, once a month, I'll be at a point, I say, wow. And it's as if I lived that whole life, my whole life, existence, died, came back, and then I started at that point. What I hear is at 5 years old, you was 2 years ahead of yourself. Because at 7 years old is when the greatest part of a child's imagination comes in. The reason why I use imagination is because that's when they start imagining themselves things that they are not, or things that they can be, or they wish to fly. Then they like put a cape on and dive across the room because they don't know about a school where they can learn to fly a plane yet, but they're fascinated by flying because the imagination sets in. But that's part of the 7-year cycles that has to do with every human being's zero time reference. Right? Start at 7 and keeps on multiplying. And one time you did that from 9 to 9, and at verse 4 you did it from 6 to 6, but you're falling back to 7. They've taken away certain of your strands, and you're back to 7. So you move at 7 to 14 to 21, 18, goes on like that, keep on going like that, 21, etc. So now you probably are having a loop, they call a spiritual loop, is you are something in your younger life jilted you, and it caused you to speed up in time. It could have been an incident in your family, it could have been a tragic death. I'm not trying to sound like a psychic reader, believe me. It could be any of a number of things that gave you that jolt, and it pushed you up 2 years mentally. And as a 5-year-old, you turned around and looked at people, and it didn't have anything to offer. And that's when you made it's like a rebirth. And you went up again, 14, another rebirth. You keep on going through cycles like that. As you get older and you're a seeker, what happens is these times lap over, and you become fed up. What you're calling starting all over again with life is I'm fed up that this portion of my life is not fulfilling to me. I must find another route. And then that other route takes you to another level. So you keep feeling I'm being born again, have a new life. You're not the only one that does that. Many people do that. They get fed up with stages in their life, in their own mind, and they write them off as new zero time references, like start again. You're not really starting again. You're really a combination of all of the thoughts and all of the imagination, all the feelings that you ever had, but you feel obsolete ones, and therefore you have the ability to erase them out your subconscious mind. But if needed, you can reflect. You know what I'm saying? That's why you're able to say, well, when I was 5 years old, I looked around and I saw that the people were not, which meant that you still have stored, you follow that, in that hidden submental part, them stories, those pieces of your life that appeared to shape the form. You knew at that time you was a seeker, that you was not a person on a spiritual path. You didn't know what spiritual path even meant back then. But you knew you were on a journey somewhere. Most people do. But most people get sidetracked by so much of the advertisements, advertisements, and the excitement, the bicycle, the basketball court. We get sidetracked by chasing girls in the schoolyard until we lose the most important parts of our life. When you study back to your so-called religious scholars, they spent from 1 to 13 with masters. And then at 13 was declared a man. And then from 13, by the time they got to 19, they were married and had a family. You know what I'm saying? Those are what that is still within inside you, in your chromosome. These things that happened in your past are still in your present. You're living in a circle of time. Time is not moving forward or backwards. You're a part of it. It's expanding in and out and passing you like waves going back and forth each time. Like if I put a dot in the center, it's going to come and it starts to go out. And just keep on going back like this here. This is what time is. So you have time crosses where events can recycle themselves, appear to renew themselves. If I was the waves keeps on crossing. And you can see it on sound waves. That's what happens. It bounces and they come back off themselves. Well, the human body is vibrating off sound. So we react just like it. And all our thought patterns are sound. They're light. In order for them to become emotions or energy emotion, they work that way. You see? So don't feel like you're a stranger. The strange part is over because you were on your way to find a spiritual master. And it took you down many schools of thought, all which are beneficial to you. Because all that you obtain while you was in martial arts is still beneficial to you, if for no other reason you learn to take care of your body. You learn how to exercise and train and discipline the body, which will help you discipline the mind. You know what I'm saying? But those are just leaping thoughts. You know, them cycles, you're still in tune with your real self. Everybody is seeking a spiritual master. And sometimes they don't stay with their spiritual master, they're not strong enough. You know what I'm saying? When they find the master is not saying what they want, like I said before, when Moshe or Moses met Melchizedek, what happened? He told him, you're not really ready for me. Because you're looking at me, you think you know what you see. How many times I tell you, seeing is, and hearing and reading is believing. You know what I'm saying? That's why I said, he said, and I went to see those Shalom, and I said, well, what you saw on television? But that was only what they made us see it, and because we saw it on television, we really believed there was men that could jump up on a building up there, flip back there, and then flip back down, you know. We really believed it when we was kids, didn't we? And they could take, steel bars and break them with their hands. We didn't take into consideration skin and bone and tissue and what they're composed of, or they got their mind on there. They teach you to think your mind on the other side of that brick. You just got to think, move the brick, and you can punch the brick and think all you feel like is with these bones, these bristles, and all this, and say, I ain't with you on the brick thing. I'm with you on the exercise and the college and all that, but I ain't with you when it comes down to punching your hand through the brick there. And it won't go through. And then they teach you, but if you really believe in your mind you can break that brick, you'll be able to break that brick. That's because they are special bricks babies. You watch any martial arts instructor when he's training kids, he touched the wood on the grain. You know you broke wood on the grain. When you go pop, it's already got the grain going in there, he can just about sneeze and break it. Then he go get a piece of teak wood. Or ebony, we see you break some ebony or some teeth. You don't see that, do you? You hit a brick in the right spot and break it. Yes. Okay? This is the last one.
Yeah, it's funny because obviously he started to clown about the martial art thing, but what was interesting when I was saying I was influenced by watching the martial arts when we were children growing up. They used to play these martial art movies on the TV, and a lot of us were familiar with it, and it had a huge impact on me. And what's funny is that this movie right here, RZA talks about it, because RZA from the Wu-Tang Clan, he said he was influenced by the exact same movie that influenced me. In fact, he was influenced by the scene. It was a similar scene, or I should say it was the same scene, but different parts influenced him versus me. And he's talking about it. And hopefully they won't, take this out of the video, because hopefully they won't say nothing. But I'm gonna show a little clip, but from the movie. And anyone who knows martial arts, they know this movie, the 36 Chambers of Shaolin. And it was the scene when he went to the 35th chamber, and that's where the masters were. And when I saw those masters and I saw what they was able to do, that triggered in my mind as I was young. I don't know, 9 years old that I saw this, 8 years old that I saw this. It triggered in my mind that there had to be beings like this. And that's what put me on that, that's what put me on the journey trying to find a master. And that's what I was trying to explain to him. But check this out.
Like I said, one of the martial art legends, but it also stars one of the greatest martial art actors since Bruce Lee, Gordon Liu. Now, Gordon Liu plays the hero here, the master killer. And the scene that inspired me the most after watching all the action was the scene where he says he wants to go to the highest level. And he walks in and the monk is like, without wisdom, there is no gain. And that hit me. And I heard.
Okay, so that was the same scene. He's talking about how he was influenced by that particular movie. Now, he doesn't show the part that influenced me, because he goes up to the master and he tries to question the master, and the master does some technique that basically made him fly out of there. And it was something. But obviously, as children growing up, we were never influenced with any kind of spiritual doctrine or education or anything like that. So that was our first introduction into this concept of spirituality, watching these films. And lucky for me, I had a Black consciousness. I wanted to find a Black person who had this type of knowledge. Unlike RZA, he obviously wanted to, look at search into the Chinese. I had no interest in searching into the Chinese. So it's interesting how he was influenced by the same thing. He just went a different path than me. But that's what I was trying to explain to the master teacher that particular night. Now this is one more question, that he's going to address, and then and then the lesson is going to close out, just so you guys know.
Question, but I know you have to line.
Okay. This is a question concerning lesson 1 that I had some time back, and I really want to get a good understanding of it. As I did my first lesson, I noticed I've seen being Dr. Good, and eventually it went to one eye, and it went to the question of who am I and what am I. I just didn't understand it as far as me writing it in and turning it. When I passed it and went on, I just really need to get an understanding of my first lesson more than my second and third.
In the first lesson, where it tells you about how Melchizedek will come and visit you, you follow? Had it not been told to you and you accept it, it may not have happened. You follow that? Sometimes to make an event take place, a person, especially a graphic person like we are, must be told the event. If you were not taught about a God, could there be a devil? So the principle of teaching about God graphically creates a necessity for a devil. And in the event that a devil is totally eliminated from the subconscious mind, then there'd be no need to call him God. So you create a scenario that takes a person to another level. And so you say, you are capable of being visited by Melchizedek. You have that ability once you bring yourself to a certain level. And the deity in you will bring Melchizedek to you. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. Will make that happen. So the first lesson of people who made that kind of contact, those people connected an etheric cord directly to me when they did that. Because I can get through their etheric cord into their dreams, into their life on various occasions to guide them. Those who blocked it because they didn't believe it possible did not allow me to make that etheric connection to them. Thus, I can't get through etheric cord to make contact with them on a spiritual level. I only meet them on the physical plane. That first lesson was making a link, a silsila, as the lesson explained it, a chain link between me and you, and me and the universe to you. I'm the connection to the enad, the 9 enads. And that connection is from me to you. That's what that first lesson is supposed to do. It's supposed to link us. And sometimes we tell people, if you didn't get that first lesson, don't be so hasty to get more books. Go back and study it until you grasp not so much of what the words are saying, but until you have that vision. I hear you.
Is that an actuality?
It's an actuality to the person it's happening to, and it will be a dream to a person who's looking on. Because both worlds are real.
Right on.
I'll explain that. If you can have a nocturnal emission, which means that while in a dream state, you can actually have a physical reaction, then there's definitely a connection between the physical. You can actually, in university, when students would sleep, we pour water in their hand and then pee the bed. Yeah, we did that stuff too. And your body can actually make a link while you're in your dream. A person can step into your dream physically. Because sometimes when you're laying in your bed and about to wake up, the brother comes in the room, he becomes a part of your dream and then you wake up. This is not so that only a spiritual being can do it. There's a doorway left open for beings to get into your dreams if you welcome them. And if you don't welcome them, but the hippocampus area of the brain starts to hallucinate and you start bringing things into your brain that you don't want there. And they traumatize you, chase you, and you wake up in a what? A full sweat. How come your sweat glands is activating if you're just, and it's all imagination and no reality? You would be imagining that you're sweating. And wake up dry. But the fact that in a dream state, as they call it, you are actually having a physical reaction tells you that those two worlds, mesh and become one. You hear me? So it is a reality. And the people that have me visit them when they need me, and have me visit their relatives when they need guidance, and their mothers in the hospital, and the different things, it is real to me and to them. And those people who sit down before their affirmation
And in their own, when they make that spiritual connection with that letter they send me, they put their hands on that letter, we connect right up with each other. And I send energy through that. The stuff you're doing with me through you. That is real. Right? What do?
Okay, that was a very important question that was asked. That was the last question, and the brother was talking about the first lesson, and in the first lesson, it actually teaches us how to make contact with the master teacher spiritually, to make contact with his oversoul. And he was he was explaining how that process is. It's a very real process to do, and that's something we talk about a lot, making contact with your ancestors on the spiritual realm. And the master teacher was explaining to us through the particular lesson how we can make direct contact with him. And by making direct contact with him on the spiritual realm, he can then take you to the higher realms to make contact with the Nathar directly. This is supposed to be the goal of every student of Wu-Sabat. This is supposed to be the goal of every student of Wu-Sabat. Everyone's supposed to be doing this for those who understand the spiritual essence of our whole doctrine, the whole mission, what we're all about. So I hope this was very informative for you guys. I hope it was edifying for everyone. If you guys, and if anyone has any questions or concerns about anything that you heard today or anything that was discussed, don't hesitate to ask. If not, we're going to close out. Obviously, with our 9 o'clock prayer is coming up. And, I think it was a very powerful class. It was a very powerful lesson that the master teacher, was giving us that particular night. And a lot of it, I have to be honest, a lot of that stuff was going over my head at the time, because I didn't have that much knowledge, in detail, because I never heard of lucid dream. I never knew what that was. I didn't know anything about going out of body. I didn't have no idea about that information at the time. In fact, back then there was really not that much information on those topics. That stuff didn't start to come out until like the mid 2000s, like 2004, 2005. Things really hit with the internet, like 2007, 9, around then, is when that information really started to pop. And you became, I became to get more aware of it, because then as I started looking at other people talking about that subject matter, then I was able to, like, oh, wow, this is what the master's been trying to teach us all these years, but I didn't have any other references other than what the master teacher was teaching us, and so, as I started to research into other, information on the subject matter, I was able to see the correlations between what we were teaching versus what other people are teaching. But keep in mind, our spiritual doctrine is definitely different than other people's spiritual doctrine. That's extremely important. Remember, we're 9 ether beings, so we connect with a 9 ether spirit force. That's our spirit force. As other people are 6 ether beings, they connect. Each race connects with their spirit force. Okay, so that's imperative that we understand that, which is why you don't join no one else's spiritual doctrine. Each race had to join their own spiritual doctrine. I'm talking about the primary races. Now, of course, most of the people on the planet Earth are mixed. So if you're mixed, you obviously, anyone can come into our doctrine, any race on Earth, because our doctrine is the primary spiritual doctrine for existence itself, because we are connected to the creative force itself, the spirit force of existence, the spirit force of creation. So anyone can connect under our spiritual doctrine, but we cannot connect with it, no one else. That's the big difference with us as Africans. We can't go to no one else's spiritual doctrine, but we can connect, but they can connect to ours. So, I think that's important, for everyone to know. Now, with all that being said, if no one has any questions, we're going to close out with our 9 o'clock prayer. Again, for those who are not familiar with it, we do our prayer system at 9 a.m., 3 p.m., and 9 p.m. every day for the purpose of spiritual development, where you go into, you're saying your prayers, your chants, and then if you're doing it on your own, you're supposed to go into a meditative state after you go through the prayer system. This is all part of your spiritual development. Question: what it was said, there are two missions, one earthly and one angelic. Some are caught up on the physical only, while others are physically trying to connect with the spiritual. Yes, we do have two missions, right? Our ultimate goal is to take the planet back, to establish justice on the planet. And this was the purpose of the Sabaean nation. That's why we have to create a nation. Our nation would be based on righteousness, because all the other nations on the planet are not based on righteousness. They're based on unrighteousness because they follow an unrighteous culture. So that is the mission, is to bring the planet back to righteousness. But you can't do it without a spiritual doctrine. You cannot set up a system of justice without a spiritual doctrine. It's impossible. And so you have to be re-educated spiritually first before you can achieve your physical goals. That's what we teach. You have to be re-educated spiritually first before you can achieve your physical goals. That's what we teach. So those are the two objectives. Objective one is spiritual development, and objective two is setting up a physical government of righteousness for us to, bring back righteousness to the planet. Like I said, the whole planet is ruled by unrighteousness. Okay. And so that's what the two objectives are. So I hope that helps. Yeah, that's what's up. Okay. All right. Well, with that being said, we'll get started with our 9 o'clock prayer. All right. Baday kala namasat wufad ko America Salmon Shalal Poot. Pa takyud. Anuki Jawef Pa Ashuk Impa Poot. Wu Kalet Ashuk Kawun Jawefnia. Anuki Kasamon Impa Poot. Wu Pa Poot Kawun Kasamon Imnia. Anuki Wahu Amapa Poot. Wu Pa Poot Kawun Wahu Amahnia. Naku Kador Naju Aman Kasamon Impa Poot. Wu Khabub Aman Muskasun. Naku Kador Kawan Kalab Bafaf Nakuk Daya Jaweb Pa Poot. Aman Wase Aman Dayani Kawun Lake Bakui Jaweb Pa Poot. Anuki Yababi Nafasni Pa Poot Kawun. Anuki Pa Poot Kador. Naku Kador Pa Poot Amu. Nakuk Amu. Lahahum Menahnum. Lahahum Menahnum. Ahumata Karahum. Ahumata Karakum. Ahumata Karanun. Ahumata Jawafnia. Ahumata Niawu Anuki Hum. Yaye Ashukre Asmua Jayenun. Yaye Nataru Afuknun. Anunata Mukra Ukum. Yaye Nataru Afuknun. Afuknun Afuknun. Yaye Nataru Nun. Anun. Atun. Atun. Amun. Namazo Wahu. Yaye Mufaku. Yaye Hu. Yaye Hu. Yaye Nataru. Yaye Soye. Yaye Soye. Yaye Nataru. Yaye Hika. Yaye Hika. Yaye Nataru. Ankum at the Pa Mufaku. Yayehu, Yayehu, Yaye Nataru. Ankum at the Pa Mufaku. Wu Anun at the Mukra Ukum. Wu Ankum at the Musanun. Yayehu, Yayehu, Yaye Nataru. Aro Muklasnum Atum Re'e. Yayehu, Yayehu, Yaye Nataru. Namazo Atu, Aro and Hu. Yaye Mukdamu Afutnun. Ankum mane yake ladudu muslafu nun. Wu muisa unun. Mane yake sawura paba. Mane yake kawuna ka'u. Mane yake ata akhakh. Mane yake kawuna bashar wu damam. Ya ye nataru mukdamu nun. Aro muftad nun. Anhu kawun manza mane pa nataru. Aro anhu. Anhu kawun baba yananan. Aro anhu. Anhu kawun atum re'e. Aro anhu. Anhu kawun haro. Namazo talu. Ya ye nataru muslafu nun. Afut nun mane pa mujwa'u. Afut nun mane gaha'an. Ya ye nataru afut nun. Mane saya khayara. Afut nun afutniya. Afut nun afutniya. Ya ye nataru nun. Namazo rabu pa tahmui. Nakuk talub tahmui bi pa nataru. Mane pa la'an lawi tananu. Kaleh ranum atni at the lahe pa nataru. Wu kaleh namazo atni at the lahe kiyat iyatan laye pa nataru. Pa sawa wu pa taro. Panam ishfa kawun. Pa sawa wu pa taro. Z kawuna nazula lahe enkum. Mane maspat wu maasa. Ame hade en wu damal Mane muslafukum wu nataru. Aju laye nafasukum. Afuk shane kawunkum. Pa sawa wu pa turuk. Pa hadayan wu pa damal. An nun tawo enkum. Lahe panan damal wu shafe. An nun tawo enkum. Lahe tem nasuinun. Anun tawa ankum lahe ashukuma ankum ata muslafunun anun ata mukra'ukum anun talub nasakuma anun talub nasakuma and so nun kahen nataru and so nun muslafunun anun ata musbatu anun Atum, Atum, Amun. Yaye nataru nun. Yaye muftau. Yaye nataru. Yaye atum re. Yaye natar. Yaye nun. Yaye natar. Yaye nun tat. Yaye natar tat. Ya ye ha, ya ye natar, ya ye hatat, ya ye natar tat, ya ye kak, ya ye natar, ya ye kaktat, ya ye natar tat, ya ye amun, ya ye natar, ya ye amun tat, ya ye natar tat, ya ye atun, ya ye natar, ya ye shishash, ya ye natar, Ya ye tafafna tat, ya ye nathar tat, ya ye sabab, ya ye nathar, ya ye natat, ya ye nathar tat, ya ye arash tat, ya ye nathar tat, ya ye asar, ya ye nathar, ya ye nabab tat hatat, ya ye nathar tat, ya ye satach, ya ye nathar, ya ye hara, ya ye nathar, Ya ye haptwi, ya ye nathar, ya ye anaktat, ya ye nathar tat, ya ye ahaharatwi, ya ye nathar, ya ye nafartun, ya ye nathar, ya ye manthu, ya ye nathar, ya ye babti, ya ye nathar, ya ye sakhamtat, ya ye nathar tat, ya ye hataharatat, ya ye nathar tat, Ya ye baibis, ya ye nathar, ya ye patata, ya ye nathar, ya ye basastat, ya ye nathar tat, ya ye imhatap, ya ye nathar, ya ye hu, ya ye nathar, ya ye matat, Ya ye nathar tat. Ya ye my heart. Ya ye nathar tat. Ya ye chafaf re'e. Ya ye nathar. Ya ye mishkinat. Ya ye nathar tat. Ya ye re'e tat. Ya ye nathar tat. Ya ye chentimen to you. Ya ye nathar. Ya ye hika. Ya ye nathar tat. Ya ye nathar tat. Ya ye nathar tat. Ya ye ma'at. Ya ye nathar tat. Ya ye renen tat. Ya ye nathar tat. Ya ye shai. Ya ye nathar tat. Ya ye sashat. Ya ye nathar tat. Ya ye mafdat. Ya ye nathar tat. Ya ye sabak. Ya ye nathar. Ya ye anak. Ya ye nathar. Ya ye chanum. Ya ye nathar. Ya ye chanas. Ya ye nathar. Ya ye patata nun. Ya ye nathar. Ya ye soye. Ya ye nathar. Ya ye haktat. Ya ye nathar tat. Ya ye amas. Ya ye nathar. Ya ye saraptwi. Ya ye nathar. Ya ye atum re'e. Ya ye nathar tat. Ya ye tahutwi. Ya ye nathar. Ya ye patata warat. Ya ye nathar tat. Ya ye sakar tat. Ya ye nathar tat. Ya ye ha. Ya ye nathar. Ya ye neheb ka. Ya ye nathar. Ya ye sakar. Ya ye nathar. Ya ye ba. Ya ye nathar. Ya ye akar. Ya ye nathar. Ya ye imharatat. Ya ye nathar tat. Ya ye wapawatat. Ya ye nathar. Ya ye sakhat hatap tat. Ya ye nathar tat. Ya ye meritat sakar tat. Ya ye nathar tat. Ya ye soye tat. Ya ye nathar tat. Ya ye garatat. Ya ye nathar tat. Ya ye asatinu. Ya ye nathar. Ya ye bahatat. Ya ye nathar tat. Ya ye chanem tat. Ya ye nathar tat. Ya ye manak tat. Ya ye nathar tat. Ya ye chamem. Ya ye nathar. Ya ye mahatwi. Ya ye nathar. Ya ye kabesin and afaf. Ya ye nathar. Ya ye damata afaf. Ya ye nathar. Ya ye meritat. Yet Mary tat, ya ye nathar tat, ya ye nasat, ya ye nathar, ya ye emdadad tat, ya ye nathar tat, ya ye nachak batat, ya ye nathar tat, ya ye sachat tat, ya ye nathar tat, ya ye anak tat, ya ye nathar tat, ya ye dadad, ya ye nathar, ya ye tum, ya ye nathar, ya ye wahu, Ya ye nathar, Ya ye yisas, Ya ye nathar, Ya ye anach, Ya ye nathar, Ya ye afnuit, Ya ye nathar, Ya ye satat, Ya ye nathar tat, Ya ye sachatwi, Ya ye nathar, Ya ye imat, Ya ye nathar, Ya ye nana, Ya ye nathar, Ya ye imnuit, Ya ye nathar, Ya ye imsataktwi, Ya ye nathar, Ya ye mugdal tat, Ya ye nathar tat, Ya ye rahashafaf, Ya ye nathar, Ya ye maratwi, Ya ye nathar, Ya ye amun re'e, Ya ye nathar, Yehu and Nun. Ata kaled jawef paut, nun re'e, tun re'e, tun re'e, mun re'e. Yeah. A.M.O.M. Jennifer. Okay. All right. So when we do the rituals, the prayers, then we do the chants, like I said before, after that, we're supposed to go into a meditated state, right? Because the prayers is about communicating with the Nathar, communicating with your ancestors, asking them of things, talking to them. The purpose of meditation is to listen to their response. Because when you remember, guys, we're connected to them by blood and spirit. So when you're focused and you're talking to them, they're listening. They're listening. And if you want to hear their response, that's why you have to transition into a meditative state. It is imperative. You can't do one without the other. It is imperative that we understand that, because I think a lot of us, we forget that part. We do the prayers, but we don't understand. We're also supposed to go into a meditative state. That's extremely important for the purpose of learning to try to communicate with them on the other realms. This was the whole essence of our whole doctrine. So with that being said, I hope this was an eventful discussion. I hope you guys learned a lot. As I always say, support what we're doing, spread the word, let people know what we're doing. We have the most profound doctrine there is. It's just people don't know it, because there's a lot to learn. It really is. But this is the answer. This is the only answer to the challenges that we're dealing on a problem, to the challenges that we're dealing with in the world. And it's an imperative that our people know this, and they won't know it unless we're all out there trying to spread this truth. So with all that being said, I bless you guys. I bless you. I hope everyone stays safe till next time. Tomorrow we still having technical difficulties about doing our lectures or our interviews, right? Because we're supposed to be doing interviews, and unfortunately I had to postpone the interviews we had lined up, because we had quite a few lined up still, but I'm still working on this software. I mean, computers and software, guys, that's just it is what it is, right? But we'll get through it. We'll get through this process, but we're gonna keep going. And just so you know, next month, June, just so you know, I won't be here for the month of June, guys. I'm going away, so I'm going out of town, and so I won't be here. And I'm taking a trip to the Caribbean. I'll be out there for a while, and I'll probably do some, I'll do some filming, and so I can come back and talk about things. Hopefully it'll be an eventful trip that I'll be taking. So I'm gonna be gone for a little bit, but I will be back. We'll be back. But all of June is gonna be hectic. That almost the whole month I'm gonna kind of be gone, and so I'll be back the first week of July, the first Tuesday of July. So just so as a heads up, the all of June will be kind of gone, but I'll keep you guys up to date on what's going on from there. And again, if you guys have any questions and concerns, don't hesitate to reach out. Spread the word. Let people know what we're teaching on NoopooH, guys. Let people know about this channel. It is imperative. It is imperative that people, get access to this right knowledge. Because our people need to know this, because they don't know. All right. And so until then, much love and be safe. Wadu Muisar.